Are you wondering if the Fujifilm X-T3 is the perfect travel camera for you? In this video, I'm going to go over my travel photography setup, including lenses and my camera settings. And most importantly, I'm going to show you guys some travel photography behind the scenes, as well as some example photos of my first time exploring the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge Park in Disneyland. What's up guys, Reggie B Photo here and welcome back to the channel. For those of you who are new, my name is Reggie Ballesteros and I'm a wedding photographer based in the San Francisco Bay Area. So even before I switched from the Nikon D750 over to the Fujifilm X-T3 for wedding photography, the Fujifilm X series cameras were always my personal travel photography camera of choice. I went from the X100S over to the X70, to the X-T20, to the X-T2, and now currently the Fujifilm X-T3. In my opinion, the Fujifilm X series cameras strike the perfect balance between a lightweight and compact body and also some pretty lightweight lenses, but still offer great image quality and phenomenal dynamic range. And in the case of the X-T3, the cameras also have great autofocus and overall pretty quick camera operation. And while it isn't the perfect camera, in my opinion, it's the perfect travel camera for me. If you want to dive into tech specs, comparisons, ISO tests, all that stuff, there are plenty of videos on that. But in this video, I wanted to focus on how I set up the camera for travel photography, as well as show you some behind the scenes of it actually being used in action to show you what it can really do. So I had the chance to visit the brand new Star Wars Galaxy's Edge Park in Disneyland. And let me tell you, the attention to detail that was put into the design of that park is insane, and it made for some great travel photography. Lucky for you guys, despite the 90-degree weather, I still strapped a GoPro onto my head to show you guys the behind the scenes of my first time exploring and photographing at this amazing place. In a bit, I'm going to show you guys the GoPro footage as well as narrate my thought process for the shots and also share with you guys some useful X-T3 features that I find benefit travel photographers. But before we start things off, let's talk about gear. As far as lenses go, my two favorite travel photography lenses are the 16mm 1.4 and the 35mm 1.4, with the 16mm being my main workhorse travel photography lens. I know most people opt for the compact versions of these lenses for travel photography, but since I'm used to using a D750 along with some 1.4 glass for travel, the Fujifilm X-T3 along with these 1.4 lenses is still a size and weight improvement for me personally. And while I don't bring this lens often for travel, I did bring along the 56mm 1.2 for this trip specifically because I was anticipating some crowds because this was a brand new park opening. So when I travel, I have three main goals for my photography. The first is to get unique shots. Basically, I'm just trying to get something a little bit more elevated than what a normal tourist would take with their cell phone. That could be lighting, composition, or just subject matter. The second goal is to retain as much data as possible. Since I'm going to be visiting these places probably not that many times, sometimes just once in my entire lifetime, I want to make sure that I retain as much possible data in that file as I can. So I'm always shooting in RAW and keeping an eye on my highlights as well as my shadows. And the third and most important goal for me is to just be quick and to not linger. Most of the time I'm traveling with my family, and that means traveling with young kids. I can't really get too bogged down with thinking about what I'm shooting or composing, so I'm just out there to get my shot and move on and try not to linger as much as possible. In photography, we like to do as much as we can to get the shot, but in this case it's not worth upsetting your spouse or your other travel mates just to get a shot, especially if this trip is not photography related. Keeping these goals in mind, I do set up my X-T3 in a way that helps me best achieve these. So I always set my camera to manual exposure, and for quickness, I use the front and rear command dials to adjust shutter speed and ISO. I have the aperture ring to adjust the aperture, obviously. In addition to manual exposure, I have my camera on preview exposure on. That way what you see is what you get. In order to aid my judgment as far as exposing the image properly, I have the highlight warnings turned on, and I also have the RGB histogram mapped out to a function button just in case I need a larger histogram to watch those shadows. And if I didn't mention already, I'm shooting in RAW. To help me with framing and composition, I do enable the Gridline 24. I use this over the Gridline 9 because a 24 has actually a center line both vertically and horizontally, and I tend to do a lot of symmetrical centered compositions. And I also have the electronic level enabled on my EVF and LCD. For the most part, I'm using AFS single point, and I'm really picking my focus points based on the composition. And one really useful feature that I like is the auto exposure bracketing mode. And this basically helps me to retain as much data as possible while also to not linger and just take my shot as quickly as possible. So I set this up in order to have a 7 frame burst, and this is at 11 frames per second, and it does 3 exposures overexposed and 3 exposures underexposed, as well as the one that's correctly exposed. This gives me a lot of flexibility to come back home and choose the file that I want after analyzing the histograms in Lightroom. For a more detailed walkthrough of kind of my full setup for my X-T3, please check out the video linked up above or also included in the description down below. Alright, now that we've got the gear and setup out of the way, let's jump into GoPro mode and get to some travel photography behind the scenes. And for some bonus footage of Kylo Ren recruiting me to join the dark side, make sure you stick to the end of this video. So at this point, we just walked into the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge Park, and I'm pretty excited. Shout out to my wife and my sister-in-law for relieving me of my dad duties for a little bit to watch the 2 kiddos while I take some photos and make this content for you guys. And right now, you'll see me just kind of bringing the camera up to my eye. I'm just pretty much warming up my eye. I have preview exposure on and I'm shooting in manual. I'm basically dialing the settings to make sure that the highlines aren't blown out and the shadows for the overall scene are just not clipped, and I'm basically taking test photos. So first up is just a wide establishing shot, nothing spectacular here, but I use this communication tower thing on the left side of the frame and this tree on the right side to kind of just frame the scene. And while it is crowded, I do like having the people for the sense of scale. And here I notice the ship off to the right, so I take a quick photo of it. As far as composition goes, I always try to have a foreground and background framing element for my subject, especially if it adds context. In an effort to get like unique shots, I try to take at least 1 or 2 angles of whatever I'm shooting. I took the first one at 45 degrees angle to the ship. Now I'm going to try one that's straight on. So moving on, I see this gunner turret and I use the articulating LCD screen to snag a low angle shot. Again, I'm just trying to get unique shots that normal people won't take with their cell phones. They're usually shooting at eye level, so I'm constantly shooting at a low or high angle to take advantage of the articulating LCD screen of the X-T3. Next, I notice one of the X-Wings from the newer Star Wars movies and try to grab a shot of it, but because it's so crowded, I try to do something different and use motion blur to blur out the crowd for some foreground interest. So I grab my ND filter and I try slowing down the shutter speed, but after reviewing the shot on the computer, it was a complete fail because it was too blurry just because I didn't have a tripod tall enough. Also, when I'm traveling, I try to take some photos of whatever the local shops or the tourist souvenir shops are selling, just, you know, for a little bit more context. And before moving on from this little stall, try to get one more shot of that X-Wing because, you know, I just wasn't satisfied with that first one, so I actually switch it up to my 35mm 1.4 and I see this bench that I can climb up on. So it's not the best shot here, and I wish I had a tall enough tripod so that I can get the people blurred out more just from the motion, but it is what it is, and this shot at least was in focus, so I'll take this one. And because everything was so detailed in this park, I found myself even taking photos of like garbage cans because it had all the foreign space language on it, but the photo wasn't interesting enough for me to include here, so I'm not going to show it to you guys. So now I'm approaching one of the major landmarks of Galaxy's Edge, and it's the marketplace at Black Spire Outpost. I try to get a wide shot taken from far away and include some people for scale. Admittedly, I wish the person to the left was a little bit more interesting, or I took a photo before she came in the frame because I kind of cropped it in just a little bit closer without being too awkward. And here I'm coming a little bit closer to the marketplace, and then I use this lamppost for framing on the left hand side, and then I balance the photo with this guy here taking a photo with his cell phone on the right hand side. For places like this, again, it's better to just embrace the crowd and work around them and use them as framing elements to draw the eye. So here both elements are drawing the eye to this center archway. And again, I'm varying angles here and I take a vertical shot. And as I'm exploring these places, I'm constantly looking up and down for interesting angles and things that just normal people wouldn't notice. And I do notice these cool light fixtures up at top. And also, if you're wondering why some of my photos are at ISO 80, just because I'm trying to keep the highlights from blowing out from some other photos. And here I just kind of forgot to put it back up to ISO 160. Another good practice to take when you're traveling is to just look back from where you just came from while you're exploring places. If you focus on progressing forward too much, you might miss something interesting behind you, especially if the lighting is different behind you. So here I double check back and I see this interesting gate door thing. I think it's like a hanger, and I try to get an off-center composition, balancing the left peak with the trees on the right. And then of course this hanger lends itself very well to a centered composition, so I take that shot. Now I'm making my way back to the marketplace and I see Chewbacca taking some photos. Because of the crowd, I switch over to the 56mm 1.2 to isolate him a little bit more. So as I continue on, I actually head to the right of the marketplace and I find a couple of speeders in what looks to be a garage or a mechanic shop. So for this first photo, I'm using the fence at the bottom right to kind of match up parallel with the diagonal shadows that's coming on the ground. This creates some interesting framing around the speeder, I think. And then for this other speeder, most people would try to get up as close as possible, but I actually opt to take a few steps back and actually include the fence in the shot, and this creates this frame all around the subject. Also, I'm constantly using those frame lines in the electronic level to keep all my lines straight. And then I also had a chance to revisit this garage in the evening, which I feel the lighting is a lot more interesting and moodier. So moving on, I see a couple of stormtroopers, so I quickly dial in the exposure before they get up close to me. I'm really just watching the highlight warning of them far away on their helmets to make sure I don't blow them out. Not knowing really what to expect, I'm shooting away here and just trying to make sure I keep them fairly centered in the frame and to not basically crop out their heads or like the important body parts like their hands or the gun. But for the most part, it's pretty awesome that they just have these characters roaming around the park like this. So I'm now at the backside of the droid workshop and I find this super cool scene. I like the people off to the left that are adding some weight to this border of the frame, and it gives it this, obvious tourist context. And I balance the other side of the frame with this, this communication tower thing again. Moving on from this shot, I actually come up to the other side of what looks to be kind of like a droid spare parts storage junk pile thing. I switch over to my 35mm 1.4 to grab a few closer up details of this red droid. Just centered and simple, nothing crazy. And I see this cool yellow and blue R2 unit in like a bathtub or wash or something. And I tried to balance the droid with the parts locker on the other side. And then I'm always just trying to capture details of everything. So here I snap a photo of this door. And then I try to get a close-up of the control panel. It's always good to get something, a little bit wide first, and then get a close-up of something. Worst case is you don't like the photo and you don't edit it, but here I really do like both shots. So I'm not sure what this ship is right here, but it looks like a TIE fighter on steroids, and I'm still using the 35, so I take a shot from further back since I have some space. But I do like the fact that the ship is lit up by the sun and the crowd is in the shade of this tunnel, so it creates some natural framing without having the crowd being like too distracting. And here I switch back to the 16mm for a wide shot. I really do wish there's more going on in the foreground toward the bottom right here and give it a sense of scale, but I'm balancing this composition with this, this watch guard tower on the left and having the ship on the right hand side. So moving on, I'm walking through this alleyway which goes by the cantina, and it's actually pretty scenic, but I wasn't happy with any of the shots that I took here, probably mainly because I was focusing on approaching the Millennium Falcon. So here I'm pretty excited to finally see the Millennium Falcon, but I try to slow down and think through my shot, and I see this archway up above and I use it to frame the ship. And I like this shot because the archway frames up the top, and then I also have this light fixture filling in what would be just an empty negative space of the sky. So moving down, you see the texture of the buildings and the rocks, and of course the Millennium Falcon, and then at the bottom there's some crowd for scale, and then in the real foreground elements there's shaded people to kind of just give some more framing elements. And I cropped this one to 16:9 for a more cinematic effect. And Easter egg, if you don't already know, that's my wife and my sister-in-law at the corner right there. And I'm pretty happy with that shot, but of course we have to get more angles just in case. and when I'm traveling I try to get as close as possible to everything. So there wasn't a fence or barricades, so I went right up front to the Millennium Falcon, and this one I'm just kind of like looking up, giving the ship a sense of epicness and scale, and the ship is symmetrical, so a centered shot makes sense here. I want to do a little bit more, but then this lady here told me I had to clear the area. So when traveling, since I'm a tourist like everyone else, I'm all about asking for forgiveness than asking for permission, but do so at your own risk. So this entire time I've been shooting at around like 2 p.m, which is pretty much high noon with harsh light, but for this shot I feel like the harsh light and shadows really bring out all the awesome textures. I try to compose a shot to give a diagonal line kind of sweeping through the frame of these 3 peaks, as well as this like pilot seat. I'm also trying to have the Millennium Falcon, this line right here, be parallel to the ground. If there was something at the top left to kind of balance out this entire frame, that would really make it perfect, but other than that I really do like this shot. Now I'm moving on and I head up the stairs to see what else is there. So I did try to get a shot of this like roasting pit, but I ended up not liking how the outside framing of this like doorway here was brighter, and typically I like the center of frame to be brighter with the framing elements on the outside to be darker. So now I'm back at the marketplace taking another perspective. Again, I'm always using the articulated screen to help me compose shots that are higher or lower than eye level. I also really like the fact that the X-T3 screen articulates for vertical shots as well. I really like this one because it just captures the busyness of the marketplace. There's tons of people in the foreground throughout the frame for scale, and you know, the busyness is balanced with the intricacy of kind of like the open air, you know, above parts of this shot. There's a lot of textures, there's a lot of netting, there's lights. Also the lighting coming through from above actually really works here. So now I'm linking up back with my family, and lucky for me they bought some of the themed food. It's like this flavored popcorn that has like a sweet and spicy mix, and they also got these soda bottles which are actually unique to the park. They're supposed to be designed to look like thermal detonators or something, at least for the look, so that's pretty cool. And obviously food photography is a big part of just traveling and travel photography, so it's also good to just have people interacting and eating the food just so it doesn't look too staged. And for me, sometimes if I have an object or food or anything like that, sometimes if I have an opportunity to move it around and find a better background or setting for it, you know, just do it. Here I take a cool shot of the soda bottle and I put it smack dab in the middle of the market. Yes, it's crowded, but for the most part people just walk around you as long as you're not in a street with driving vehicles. And again, the vertical articulating screen comes clutch here. This shot also shows the versatility of the 16mm 1.4 to get up real close and create some smooth bokeh. Exploring the marketplace a little bit more, there's what looks to be some like racked speeder bikes, and I prep the shot using kind of the preview exposure, and I just wait for the time when there's no one crossing the frame and I grab the shot. I also go up to one of the stalls and they're selling these like quote-unquote pets, but I'm not sure who would buy this thing because it's like, it looks like a gremlin and it's like 75 bucks. I think it's supposed to be like a puppet where you can control it, but I had no interest in buying one of these. And here I take another shot of the marketplace's like cool open air design. I just love the texture juxtaposed with the highlights from the sky. Lots and lots of texture here at this park. So for the rest of these photos, I don't have behind the scenes footage, but here just a couple more angles of the marketplace, some of the lights, and then here is a straight on shot of all kind of like the busyness. This one is of the main restaurant there. I think it's called like Docking Bay 7. And of course, like everything else, it's very themed and actually very, very well done. And this is actually just the line or waiting area for the Millennium Falcon ride. They basically had this full detailed out like ship being repaired. And as we were leaving the park, I did take one look back and I did find this cool little scene of this kind of like door tunnel archway, and I have it underexposed just a little bit, that way I can expose the little scene inside the doorway for the highlights. And I do have a few night shots of this place. You know, I wanted to explore a little bit more at night, but of course the kiddos and the parents and the auntie and I were all getting tired, so we didn't really explore too much. And for some bonus footage, I was able to film a little bit of the Millennium Falcon ride with my X-T3 with the 16mm 1.4. So of course I snapped some photos. I like these shots because the iconic window panels go very nicely against what's outside the ship, and also just the cockpit control panels. Here I was exposing for the highlights, but still trying to get my shutter speed fast enough to not blur out too much of the ride. And this pretty much wraps up the behind the scenes and the example photos that I took on that trip. So I'm hoping you learned something new about the Fujifilm X-T3 and how to use it for travel photography. If not, then I'm hoping at least you enjoyed some photos and video of me exploring this brand new Star Wars Galaxy's Edge theme park. If you want to see more videos like this, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And let me know down in the comments below what camera you use for travel photography. And if you're ready to pull the trigger on the Fujifilm X-T3 for your next trip, I have affiliate links down below if you want to support the channel at no additional cost to you guys. As always, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I'm posting a new Fujifilm or photography video every other week. And if you want to see more of my photo work, be sure to follow me on Instagram at ReggieBPhoto for a new post every single day. Alright, that's it for me. Remember to get out, go shoot, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.
Your presence is requested. This way, please. Clear the way, please.
The dark side calls. Will you turn against the light?
Sure.
Good. You cannot fight your destiny.
On your way.